Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I am Xizhi. Coming up in this edition, South Korea's Constitutional Court has voted unanimously to remove impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol from office. U.S. stocks have plummeted in response to Donald Trump's announcement of global tariffs. And Hungary has announced plans to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. We begin in Asia. South Korea's Constitutional Court, the top court, has voted unanimously to remove impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol from office. Acting Chief Justice Moon Hyun-bae delivered the verdict.
The benefit gained by dismissing the respondent overwhelmingly outweighs the national losses resulting from the president's impeachment. Therefore, I issued a ruling with a unanimous opinion. Since this is an impeachment case, I will confirm the time of the verdict. It is 11:22 a.m. Older respondent President Yoon Suk-yeol is impeached.
The court upheld the National Assembly's decision to impeach Yoon for his failed attempt at martial law in December. Zhang Yun reports.
The Constitutional Court acknowledged all 5 grounds for impeachment by the National Assembly and concluded that there were serious unconstitutional and illegal acts, enough to justify Yoon's removal. It said that Yoon had mobilized the military and police, undermining the National Assembly and other constitutional institutions, violating fundamental human rights and abandoning his duty to protect the Constitution. The court determined that Yoon's declaration of martial law was illegal. Moon said that Yoon has violated the Constitution and the law by declaring martial law, reprising the country's history of abuse of martial law decrees dating back to military regimes. Yoon has denied the charges against him as his unprecedentedly for a sitting president appeared in person to defend himself in 8 of 11 court hearings leading up to the verdict. He apologized for not meeting public expectations. The ousted leader thanked the people for the support and noted that it was an honor to work for the country. Yoon is expected to have to exit from the presidential residence in Hamnam-dong, Yongsan District soon. In 2017, ex-President Park Geun-hye left the presidential residence after 2 days. Park was impeached in late 2016 for abuse of power and corruption and ousted through a unanimous decision on March 10th. This led to an early presidential election on May 9th that year. Likewise, an election to choose Yoon's successor will take place within 60 days, or June 3rd at the latest.
That's Zhang Yun reporting. The Constitutional Court's ruling keeps acting President Han Duck-soo in power. Han has promised an orderly and a peaceful vote.
In support of the will of the sovereign people, we will do our best to manage the next presidential election so that the next government can be launched without disruption in accordance with the Constitution and laws.
Polls indicate that Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung will be the favorite in a snap election. The end of Yoon's presidency doesn't mean the end of his legal trouble. Jack Barton explains.
Well, next for President Yoon Suk-yeol will be the criminal investigation that's running parallel to this, I should say the criminal trial on charges of insurrection. So Yoon's troubles are not over by a long shot. He'll be stripped of the presidency. There will be the trial on insurrection, but now the prosecution can add other charges to the list. Even leading up to that ruling, both camps knew where it was going, the pro-Yoon and anti-Yoon. The anti-Yoon demonstrators cheering, applauding each time the Chief Justice Moon went through the list of charges the National Assembly had brought against him and made it clear that each of them had broken the Constitution. So by the time that verdict came down, everybody knew this where this was going. Again, anger from the pro-Yoon camp. But we've already heard from Lee Jae-myung, the opposition leader, thanking the people, who came out onto the streets to give this reassurance to South Korean democracy, and also saying this sends a message of stability again to the world, that the period of political paralysis here in South Korea is coming to an end. We were with the pro-Yoon people, and that ruling was read down. the Chief Justice also had some pretty harsh words for the opposition, and many of the anti-Yoon people were nodding, the people who you would think would be supporting the opposition party. And that is why we're seeing a sort of a surprise political split. The opposition still has the lead, but there's been a real growth in the People Power Party, the ruling power of Yoon, because it's seen that the acting presidents actually haven't done a bad job of governing while Yoon's been going through this process. Particularly the previous one, Choi Sang-mok, is really being seen as a stable set of hands. So it depends who they put in place against Lee Jae-myung. And the other big wild card factor here is it isn't just martial law that will be playing into this election. It is, of course, Trump and his tariffs. So perhaps whoever handles that best in the eyes of the public may ultimately be the victor.
That was Jack Barton in Seoul. Turning to North America, U.S. stocks plummeted on Thursday in response to President Donald Trump's announcement of global tariffs. Major indexes reported the biggest one-day losses in years. Mitch McCann has more from outside the New York Stock Exchange.
Well, Thursday marked the worst day for the market since the height of the coronavirus pandemic 5 years ago. The Dow Jones fell 1,679 points, its worst day since June 2020. The S&P 500 was down as well, 4.84%, also its worst day since June 2020. And the Nasdaq was down as well, 5.97%, its worst day since March of 2020. Now, there were broad sell-offs across all markets, but let's start with some of the tech stocks that have been selling. Investors have been selling stocks in Apple, which makes a number of its devices throughout Asia. It finished down 9.25%. Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, it was down 8.96% at the closing bell. Amazon was down 8.98%. Also affected were sportswear brands, many of whom make their products in Vietnam, Indonesia and China. For example, Nike is reportedly a company that makes 25% of its shoes in Vietnam. It finished down 14.44%. Adidas was down 10% and Puma was down 11.84%. Now, despite the gloom on the markets on Thursday, President Trump says he's determined to continue with this approach, saying things are going very well. Those were his words. As he departed the White House on Thursday, he said the markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, and the country is going to boom.
That was Mitch McCann on the performance of the U.S. stock markets. Turning to the Middle East, the Israeli army has been expanding its operations in Gaza, aiming to seize large areas of the Palestinian territory. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the military is set to establish a new security corridor. The Israeli troops have also intensified airstrikes on Syria. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
Netanyahu saying that Israel will now take over what is known here in Israel as the Morag corridor. The Morag corridor pretty parallel to the Philadelphia corridor, only the Morag one is a few more kilometers to the north. That would pretty much cut the city of Rafah from the entire Gaza Strip. Israel wants to create a corridor which is takes the entire width of the Gaza Strip, a bit to the north of the city of Rafah, roughly cutting the whole city from the Gaza Strip, and Israel would consider that, not annex that, it's not something that is being talked about, but add that to the security zone, to the security parameter which Israel is holding. More evacuation orders by the IDF spokesperson in the Arabic language handed to the residents of some neighborhoods of Gaza City, Shujaiya and Zaytun, Jabalia, among others. Israel indicating that it will continue with the military operation in full force. In Syria was pretty rare. It began with a lot of targets on various Air Force bases in Syria, various bases where Israel claims that there were remains of ammunition of the Syrian army, which Israel fears will eventually be turned against Israel. And then later in the night, there were actually quite severe firefights in southern Syria. Defense Minister Israel Katz setting a very clear message to the new Syrian regime, saying that Israel will not allow in any way for any entrenchment of militants in southern Syria close to the Israeli border, and will also act against the remains of any military power in Syria. Therefore, we could expect these kinds of actions to continue.
That was Jonathan Regev reporting from Tel Aviv. The Gaza Health Ministry has reported that the latest Israeli airstrikes killed at least 100 Palestinians across Gaza. Authorities say the number of deaths is likely to rise because many people are seriously injured. Israel issued a sweeping evacuation order for parts of northern Gaza ahead of the ground operations. Rami Amagari reports.
Strikes have been continuing unabated since the early morning in the Gaza Strip, in the whole Gaza Strip. Actually, more than 100 Palestinians have been killed, according to health officials, for now, and more than 130 others have been wounded. Majority of those wounded and killed are women and children, as the strikes hit residential homes in different parts of the Gaza Strip, including the southern Gaza Strip city of Khan Yunis, the central Gaza Strip refugee camp of Al-Maghazi, and also the Shija'iyya, which was ordered by the Israeli army, Shija'iyya neighborhood and other neighborhoods nearby, to evacuate. More orders for evacuation of the Palestinian population here in Gaza are taken into effect in the northern Gaza Strip, the Jabalia and other neighborhoods around Jabalia refugee camp have been ordered to evacuate to the west of Gaza City. We have seen many people carrying their luggage on the horse carriages and on some vehicles, limited vehicles available in the street from the eastern part of the Gaza City, which have been ordered, like Shija'iyya, which had a very massive strike, with the evacuation orders taken into effect for these neighborhoods. That's the situation. More escalation on the ground by the Israeli army for the time being in the Gaza Strip.
That's Rami Amagari reporting from Gaza. In Europe, Hungary has announced plans to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. The decision came as Prime Minister Viktor Orban hosted his visiting Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, who faces an ICC arrest warrant over alleged war crimes in Gaza. Netanyahu has applauded Hungary's decision. The ICC governing body has expressed regret and voiced concern, insisting that Hungary has a duty to cooperate with it. Pablo Gutierrez has more from Budapest.
As a member of the International Criminal Court, Hungary would have been expected to enforce its arrest warrant for visiting Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu. But Prime Minister Viktor Orban says that will not happen. Orban says the ICC has become a political tool, and that is why he's defining the arrest warrant. The ICC was formed about 2 decades ago to bring individuals to account for serious accusations like war crimes. Hungary signed the founding treaty in 2001. Actually, it was Orban who signed that treaty. However, he now says that this was never fully adopted into national law, and without that step, he insists Hungary has no legal basis to enforce the ICC warrants. Well, the European Union has not yet commented, but this decision is likely to escalate tensions between Budapest and Brussels. Brussels is already at odds with Orban over rule of law issues, and Netanyahu, who has not visited Europe since the ICC's arrest warrant was issued, has welcomed this move, calling Hungary's decision, listen to this, bold and principled. Meanwhile, legal experts have pushed back, saying war crimes fall under international law, which Hungary must recognize. Orban's withdrawal order now heads to the Hungarian parliament, where his party holds a majority. It is if it's approved, Hungary will become the first EU country to leave the International Criminal Court. The entire process should take about a year.
That was Pablo Gutierrez in Budapest. In China, Friday is Qingming Festival in the country. It is a time for families to honor ancestors. People usually visit graves, clean tombstones, and leave offerings. China is having a 3-day holiday for the occasion, also known as Tomb Sweeping Day. Many see the long weekend as a good opportunity for a short trip. The Transport Ministry is anticipating 760 million passenger trips nationwide. Dai Kai has noticed some trends.
It's the first official holiday since China's Lunar New Year holiday, and it's also a perfect time for a short getaway. Now, a recent report from Ctrip.com shows that the searches and also the bookings for Qingming Festival trips surged by 136% compared to the previous week. Now, people are favoring shorter, more relaxed trips this time, and many are choosing to drive themselves. And of course, people are taking high-speed rails. And the holiday time lasts 3 days, but if travel time is factored in, it stretches to 5. China's railway authorities estimate over 84 million trips during the entirety of holidays. Some of the popular activities include flower viewing, camping, and hiking. Now, if we talk about camping, the camping gears, they're on the rise. For example, from tents to the portable showers, they surged up the sales of them on some of the major online shopping platforms. Rural tourism is another trend, with urban dwellers looking to experience countryside life, farming life, and local traditions. Meanwhile, searches related to sports events, to music concerts are also on the rise. They surged around 48% year on year. And theme parks like Shanghai Disneyland Park, Universal Studios Beijing, and some of the homegrown theme park brands in China will continue to draw massive crowds. Now, with local governments in many places rolling out consumer vouchers, spending on travel, on dining, accommodation, entertainment are expected to see another boost.
That was Dai Kai reporting. Finally, in Africa, the largest city in Tanzania is upgrading its public transport system. The UDAT Transportation Company, which provides bus rapid transit services in Dar es Salaam, is set to receive 100 new gas-powered buses by the end of the year. The first test bus will arrive this month. Daniel Kiju has more.
The roads of Dar es Salaam are no stranger to long queues and crowded buses, but change could be on the horizon as UDAT prepares to roll out a fleet of modern gas-powered buses. Commuters hope for a smoother, more efficient ride.
These 100 buses are coming to add on and replace some of the old buses. The current buses we have are old and, over the last 7 to 8 years, have been heavily used. They work almost around the clock, almost 24 hours a day, from 4 a.m. to midnight.
The company has faced growing pressures to improve services, with calls to simplify access to fare cards and reduce transportation delays. For passengers, the upgrades promise a more comfortable and reliable journey, one that could transform daily travel for thousands.
The buses are always full, and sometimes you may wait for hours. So if these new ones come, I hope it will be better.
The heat is too much inside the buses now. If they bring air-conditioned ones, it will be a big relief.
Commuters have long complained about overcrowding and breakdowns, issues UDAT says the new fleet will help address. Beyond cost savings, the shift to gas is expected to cut emissions, contributing to cleaner air in Tanzania's largest city.
CNG It will reduce our costs. CNG gas is cheaper than diesel, and there are many global studies that prove this. You can save up to 40 or 45% of the money spent on energy by moving to gas from diesel. Also, the new buses will be a higher spec. It will be a full AC full-time and have screens inside.
At one point, Dar es Salaam's rapid transit system was hailed as a model for African cities, praised for its efficiency and affordability. However, aging infrastructure and rising demand have strained the network. Now, UDAT hopes this major investment will restore confidence in public transport. With these new buses, UDAT is betting on a greener, more efficient future for Dar es Salaam's public transport. But as commuters await their arrival, the real test will be whether this investment delivers a change they've been waiting for.
That was Daniel Kiju reporting. Now recapping the headlines before we go, South Korea's top court has voted unanimously to remove impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol from office. US stocks have plummeted in response to President Donald Trump's announcement of global tariffs. And Hungary has announced plans to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics and business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.